we called the centaur being used as a boss model a full year before it was, because it appeared in the Herda space station at the beginning of Honkai Star Rail.
Yeah, we're still doing a victory lap about that multiple months later.
Well, I mean, yeah, it just goes to, further cement the point that was made before. Hoyo is very efficient with what they produce and how they reuse things.
So, you're welcome, and thanks for listening to the Shade Chamber, who continue to be Apollo's favorite little guinea pigs of prophecy.
Please look forward to the final boss fight of the game looking like the Metal Gear Solid 3 ending.
It's gotta be, right? Those stupid little flowers.
Yeah, the flowers in Lumine's hair. What she points out when you play as her.
The flowers in my hair!
The flowers in my hair?
Mesdames et messieurs, Brutocolinus et Boudinets, bienvenue chez la Chambre Ombragée, un podcast de Genshin Impact. Je suis la Brutocolina qui va te guillotinera, buffette.
C'est moi, le joueur démoniaque, le maître de la sobriquette, Casseur Laga.
Et moi, c'est l'ami effrayant du garçon bégayant, Dauphin.
Salut les gens, je suis le radis sans jardin Fred et j'ai oublié la plupart de mon français après mon point de réimpression a changé au sous-sol de Ningguang.
Finalement, c'est la serviteur principale de l'Académie française, Vagabond.
Anyway, we're the churlmen of the board of the Shade Chamber, and we're about to launch into our gameplay discussion and closing thoughts about Genshin's Fontaine region. But before we do, we'd like to move your attention away from our studio in the Jade Chamber's basement and up to its first floor, because it sounds like Ningguang has some visitors.
Welcome to the Jade Chamber. I am Ningguang, Tianxin of Qixing.
Hi, it's me, Tiff. Remember from Beto's boat party last summer? Oh, you don't remember me? Well, whatever. Never mind. We have an apology gift from Mondstadt. Sorry Venti got drunk and jumped in the pool wearing your lingerie. So here's some dandelion wine.
Fresh from Angel Share.
You have surpassed my expectations again.
So you do remember me. Well, Fiends is going to go take this down to the basement for you.
Sure. If anything important comes up, I will be sure to send for you.
So about that chess game. Looking for a rematch anytime soon?
Yes, you were the person who came to mind.
Wait, really?
Yeah, naked jugglers. I swear, Albedo thought of everything. It was the best boat party ever.
Oh my god, I bet. Damn it, I should have been the one that stuck aboard. Wait, is that Fiends from Tales of Tevat, a Genshin lore podcast?
Oh, Archons, this wine is so heavy. I don't know what they put in it. It's supposed to be dandelion wine, but hey, guys.
Let me take that. I might drop a few on the way, but it's nothing I'm not used to. Anyway, Fiends, we're so glad you made it. Did you have any trouble making it down here?
No, but I don't think I have long. Beto seemed to be catching on to Tiff talking about the boat party that we didn't go to last week, so I don't want to take too long. Hopefully that wine lasts you at least a week, so let me know if you need more.
Well, it depends on how Rad's raid sessions go, you know.
Oh, right. True. Well, if you need more, just put in a pigeon call to us and we'll figure it out.
Wait, shit, those are for sending messages to people?
Yeah, what have you been using them for?
Been eating them.
Oh, all right. Well, on that note, before I get going,
Yes, Fiends, why are you here in Ningguang's basement with the Shade Chamber? What do you have to announce?
Yes, well, first off, I want to say you guys have decorated this place very nice. I did not expect the basement of the Shade Chamber to look so nice.
Thank you. It's 90% of our shed hair.
Okay, anyway, I'm here to tell you guys about our Discord server, Shades of Tevat, which is a collaborative zone hosted not only by the Shade Chamber, but by Tales of Tevat.
Woo!
Where we've invited our followers, fans, and maybe even our haters to come hang out, talk Genshin lore, builds, Honkai Star Rail, a lot of Warframe talk this week.
That's right. The hosts of Earth's mightiest Genshin podcast, The Shade Chamber and Tales of Tevat, have officially joined forces and piled their ranks together to make one united community Discord, Shades of Tevat. If you have wanted to hang out with the Shade Chamber churls or the Tales of Tevat Tot crew, here we are. Meet like-minded listeners such as yourself, discuss Genshin, discuss the podcast, discuss whatever is on your mind. We don't judge. Except we do. It's called the Shade Chamber after all. We're going to do a lot of informal streams there, not just Genshin, but also Genshin. Other Hoyoverse games. You'll get our thoughts on Zenless Zone Zero and Honkai Star Rail and all the other crap that Hoyo makes, as well as good games. Anyway, we already have a bunch of people and it's awesome. So you should join in. It's like a chill pool party for adults only fans of Genshin.
If travelers or trolls are over the age of 18 and ready to adult swim with us, you can check out our server at bit.ly/shadesoftevat with no capital letters, no spaces, or anything like that. Come on in, let us know what you're interested in, and get talking.
You will also find a link to it in this episode's description, in our podcast description, on our Twitter, and maybe even on the Shade Chamber website that none of you guys ever use.
I think I can hear Tiff upstairs getting a little not hit on. I wouldn't say hit on by Beta. I think I can hear Beta.
Is she getting hit on or is she gonna get hit? There's a difference.
I think she's gonna get smacked down.
Okay. You better go run interference then.
Join our server. We'll see you guys there. And
yes.
Let me go before Tiff gets her ass kicked.
All right. Go.
Bye.
We'll cover for you. Bye.
Thank you for
Careful
coming.
on the stairs.
Tiff, I think we gotta go, right?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Bye,
Get me out of here.
Thanks for
Bye. Have a safe glide. So welcome to the first installment of our Au revoir, Fontaine Ménage à Trois, our end of the region trilogy, where we cover everything we wanted to talk about Fontaine and 4.x before we go into 5.x and Natlan.
And then cue the toilet flushing sound in the air horns.
Yeah, exactly. While this was a mixed bag region for us, in some respects, we would love to stay and play in the great pool of Orbeez at the center of Teyvat, and some of us couldn't get out of here fast enough. There are a couple of topics that we have yet to discuss.
If you want us to talk about anything, join us in our shiny new Discord server and ping us directly.
Hit us up at the Discord, tweet us, comment to us on our YouTube, or email us at shadechamberpodcast@gmail.com.
We're actively fighting the clock here. If you want to say something to us about Fontaine, you only have minutes before we're in Natlan, so send it to us now. Like and comment on the video and subscribe. Comment on the video in the next 5 minutes to earn 1,600 V-Bucks.
And we will send you a baguette in the mail.
And Mr. Beast's bid for presidency will go through.
Also, I'm really bad about reminding, but please do review our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That really helps us visibility and also just kind of promotes us to like-minded listeners like yourself. Please go on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a positive review. And if your review is funny or charming enough, we will read it on the air. Anyway, allons-y. The last discussion of Fontaine. I said Fontaine. Fontaine away.
Sachet away, Fontaine.
How do we feel about Hoyo's attempt at underwater gameplay? This is something no one in the history of video games has ever once gotten right. But this was relatively tolerable. Nothing crazy to write home about, but it wasn't horribly offensive. And I think that's the best you can do with underwater gameplay. What do you guys think?
MiHoYo kind of need to approach this carefully just because, again, it's not a game mode that's ever going to be really used outside of this region.
The problem with the way that the underwater, gameplay was implemented is that it covers about 50% of the region. So we were expected to, engage with it a lot. The gameplay was fine. It was meh. You could swim around. You had some interesting underwater visuals occasionally, but for the most part, you'd just be swimming between underwater cliff faces or through large kelp. And there wasn't any kind of gameplay standout to really latch onto and make that exciting. It just became more of a chore that you had to do for certain commissions or to explore certain areas. So I think while saying the gameplay was fine is a good win for the Hoyoverse development team, I think the fact that it was so widely integrated across the region ended up hurting the overall gameplay of the region.
And I mean, this is also coming from the angle of we have to spend a year in this region, whereas anybody who's playing the game after this point and is not doing just Fontaine exclusive daily commissions, it'll be a different experience because the exploration was generally fun. And I think the biggest thing to put forward is that it was all competently done. Swimming felt good. Grabbing powers from the various undersea animals felt good. Using the powers felt good. It doesn't really matter what character you have because it's completely divorced from any of the main gameplay. So you could totally do all of the underwater stuff with like a high level, high HP traveler. It was fine. And I mean, it was fine in a context of an entire industry that has basically never gotten underwater combat done well. This was competent. This was okay. It's just that the entire problem with the rest of the game is that it's a live service game and it expects you to log in daily just to get characters, meant that we spent too long underwater, like how we spend too long everywhere else in the game.
Like Break said, it felt really good. I think the underwater environments were beautiful. And one thing that not enough people talk about is that the animations and how they blend into each other when your character is moving are seamless. Like Hoyo is like unimpeachable with their character animations and their smoothness and stuff, and this mechanic of underwater movement continue to show why they're the best out there at this. That being said, I avoided doing it as much as possible, and that in itself is a huge failure. I found that if there was anything I could do underwater that I could also do on dry land, for instance, grinding the materials from the sea creatures to build my characters, I would always do it on land, because ultimately this is a game that demands so much time of you that doing anything that feels even slightly less optimal feels like a waste of your time.
And make no mistake, this did come at the cost of other features and gameplay things. So.
Yeah, I would absolutely say you can tell they put a lot of resources and work into this, but you can also tell that it diverted a lot of resources from other things in the game that might have given us a slightly more favorable impression of Fontaine as a whole.
Yeah, much like a dam, it diverted resources.
It really was like a self-damning prophecy. That you would have to tie yourself to this water element, but at the cost of everything else. Womp womp.
Not to be a wet towel about all this, but from my limited subjective perspective, I actually didn't really like the underwater combat, like at all, really. Like in the limited time I spent playing Genshin over the past, was it like a year or something? We're not gonna tell you that, it's fine, it doesn't matter. From what little time I spent with it, it was kind of like, I don't know if you could call it like a rock, paper, scissors mechanic or something, but like the certain enemies need to have certain attack types to deal with them thing was very slightly annoying.
Yes. I think it was really telling that as more underwater regions unlocked, more sea creature attacks that you could use unlocked, and they went from like the stingray slash that would take 2 or 3 hits to kill a sea creature to the jellyfish bomb, which could take them out in 1. And I would find myself literally slogging to the area where the jellyfishes were because it was worth it to me to have the one-shot power. Like I really, really got tired of not being able to down these things in one go.
That's the thing, though, is the only power that really had a large gameplay difference was the crab shell power, and that was just because it could act as a perfect counter. Everything else was just, aim at the thing and shoot the blast, and then the only real difference was damage numbers.
There were differences with the bomb because you could place it somewhere and that you would use that for puzzles to have like a delayed, explosion.
But ultimately it was still just aim and then shoot, and then you could hit the button again to blow it up, but it didn't really feel that different from like any of the rest of the attack powers outside of just the delayed blast. Like the underwater combat is fine because there wasn't a large variety of gameplay options there.
Yeah.
I think it was competent, like you could move and you could do things. I wouldn't call it a good gameplay experience.
It reminded me a lot of the first Gravity Rush, where enemy fights are basically targets you have to hit in this like slightly more complicated moving system and a lot more drawn out because you have to reposition yourself. And that just kind of added to the tedium of doing anything underwater, was like the slower pace of combat wasn't really improved by the early low damage Fontaine abilities that you had at the beginning of the region.
Yeah, and it completely ignored kind of one of the big draws of combat or even puzzle solving in all of Genshin, which is the elemental reactions. Like, we only could work with these underwater sea creatures, which means we were just dealing hydro damage to hydro-based creatures. There wasn't anything that allowed, like Break brought up earlier, our individual characters that we were bringing to the puzzle to like solve anything. There wasn't any kind of elemental reactions we had to puzzle through and figure out based on our existing powers. It was just which sea creature is the right one for this.
I'm going to be controversial. I didn't miss that. I actually really didn't miss the way that characters are homogenized underwater.
I mean, unfortunately, it's a case where they weren't ever going to create a system that was as complex as the above ground.
Yeah.
Like, make no mistake,
combat.
This is very well done for what it is, and you can tell they put everything into it. They couldn't have done more than this in the amount of time they had.
Yeah, because if we know one thing, it's that Hoyo never really back traces their steps. They wouldn't go and remodify 50 plus characters to work underwater. So this was sort of the only option they had.
Well, I have one more bit, I guess, but one of my biggest complaints about underwater combat was that it locks you out of any I guess utility that your characters might have. I mean, things like shields and healing.
Right.
Because I usually walk around with like a shield or a healer or something. So like even if it's a battle of attrition, I can usually come out of that.
Yeah.
But like underwater, it just felt like getting the heck out of dodge, which is occasionally a little wonky if you weren't used to maneuvering in, I guess, 3D, so to speak.
Yeah, like your ability to heal depends entirely on your stamina management, your ability to get to the golden fish that can heal you.
I remember running into there's the challenge enemies or whatever. I felt like I was sort of being punished for accidentally like going, I don't know, off the beaten track, or maybe not even off the beaten track, but like off to a place where something was waiting to fucking jump my bones.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys use to play Genshin? Because I think that also matters. Like, I play controller.
Oh yeah, I'm on controller.
I'm on PC, so keyboard.
I am also a mouse keyboard player.
Yeah, mouse keyboard.
I felt like swimming felt really good on controller. I've literally never played this game mouse keyboard, so I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
It was just WASD and then right click to change character direction. Like, it wasn't anything.
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah,
you couldn't go up or down.
No, you could with like spacebar and control, I think, are the buttons you use to like ascend and descend. Like, I'm not saying the movement was bad. The movement is just a typical swimming system. You move around in 3 dimensions. Yeah.
I was just wondering.
It just takes some adjustment. That's not really like, that's probably the least part of the complaints I have about it.
Yeah, literally. Same here. I thought movement was fine.
The actual control scheme was pretty similar to Warframe's Arcwing movement, actually, which is kind of funny. The change I would offer in terms of the underwater abilities, just to make it even a little more tied in with like the rest of the setting, is add a like elemental affinity for some of them. Like the crab shield like could be a geo infused thing, and then maybe that changes the way that it interacts with certain blasts that it takes or is able to block things. Or like the jellyfish could have been electro, and like
it's kind of funny because there is a little bit of that de facto. For instance, like the crab and the jellyfish can break through cracked rocks, but the other ones can't. Like, they have like fake properties of their own within the attacks.
Right, but I don't think that we saw those interact in ways that are emblematic of those elements. So for example, my example with the jellyfish would be, it can create the blast, but maybe anything that's not immediately killed takes a little bit of electro damage too, and you get electroshocked underwater. For the crab shield, maybe depending on the character you're using, the HP for the shield is a little bit higher or something like that. Like, just small changes that tied back into the elements that exist in the rest of the setting would have already made it feel a lot more integrated than what we ended up getting, which is just like, an intermixed group of sea animals that you just kind of have to go out of your way to find.
They probably had internal discussions about adding elemental affinities, and then I can guarantee you that if they did, the conversation turned to, but it'll be too complicated team building underwater, so they opted to not do it. That's a really good point, though, because I think that's also emblematic of how Hoyo managed this entire region, which is they were really concerned about making sure that underwater combat felt good. And in doing so, they actually played it incredibly safe. Like, all of the swimmable regions were, technically speaking, kind of in these lanes that existed on the map. They always made sure that you weren't ever really in like giant, empty, open bodies of water. You were still relatively, at least for the first couple of patches, you were still
No, you pretty
really
much were
like
always
kind of
very anchored to the topography.
yeah,
And
and they got a little more complicated with Remuria, but they also gave you some outs in Remuria, like Sila's ability to kind of like shoot you in directions so you weren't swimming independently for so long. Because, one thing I learned about games is that like walking is not gameplay. Like traversing things is typically not fun unless you're engaging and making decisions. So if you're just walking or swimming in a open zone, that's not fun. And they did try to reduce that.
I had an idea for an easy fix. I think what you said, Break, was really fucking salient as far as like, I think they realized by the time they made, oh Christ, what's it called? What the
Remuria.
Yeah. By the time they made Remuria, they realized that people fucking hated just like traversing blank empty space. It would have been cool if there was like accelerated movement near the surface where it is just like kind of empty, because they always had those speed rings that would kind of interlace through stuff at the bottom, but the bottom is where the points of interest are, and that's where you want to go slow. Like, I would really like it if I was able to kind of like zoom through a tunnel or just like a zone of faster water movement closer to the surface where I'm not interacting in the context of stuff on the ocean floor. But then if I want to like dive down and explore, then it becomes a little slower and a little more precise. And that way I don't feel like I'm spending that much time, wasting my time zooming through open ocean.
Maybe they should have just had like currents that ran throughout the bodies of water, so they would have been like underwater aquabus lines, essentially, where you can just hop in and then hop out in the way that they show off in like Finding Nemo, like an example.
Yeah.
That would be
And
great.
boy, do I have certain things to say about like how the aquabus lines were really important for something that there were only two of in Fontaine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're gonna hear us say Mondstadt 2 a lot when we talk about Fontaine, kind of in both like positive and critical. And I think this definitely applies to the overworld. It had the same color palette, it had the same hills, and it kind of had the same feeling when you were forced to run around on dry land. Didn't really like the overworld experience on Fontaine. Didn't feel good or interesting. We are so spoiled by like Sumeru, and then on a lesser extent Inazuma, in that every single overworld of like the subregions that came out were so different in terms of traversal, appearance, and just general experience. Whereas Fontaine, like the overworld felt really homogenized to me, and the underwater areas also felt like pretty homogenized. I didn't see a massive difference between the new underwater areas as they unlocked over the course of the Fontaine versions.
The Inazuma zip mechanics using the Sakura blossoms and then subsequently the Sumeru vine mechanics were the best addition to both crossing like everywhere, all of the like mountainous and island regions of Inazuma. They were the best way to cross around the jungles. And then most importantly, the deserts of just getting through empty spaces. And not having that in Fontaine felt like getting repeatedly punched in certain places, like specifically the Poisson entrance. I'm like, why are you making me climb up a wall out of here? We had to leave this place a lot.
Yeah, this is literally something we brought up in our Sumeru recap a while back. Lesson number 1 of open world game design: everyone hates climbing. It's monotonous, it feels bad, and Genshin had figured that out by Sumeru with the zip lines. But again, just like in Mondstadt, in Fontaine, we spend way too much time schlepping up a bunch of bland gray cliffs and draining our stamina.
It really made Fontaine feel slow to traverse around, which you do not want in a game that is about exploration and like finding new places to like. You want people to stop and linger at really cool spots. You don't want them to have to run across the same 3 hills over and over again because there's just no traversal mechanics that are there to assist with it.
Now, I'll tell you what we did get. What we did get were the they have a specific name, but the airships. The airships sucked.
Yeah.
Like, you could tell that the airships were kind of their vision for rapid travel over land, but it's like, it's kind of like the warp gates that they put around Seirai and Watatsumi, which are awful because you have to remember where they are. You have to remember where they're going. The lighthouses are often guarded by a bunch of enemies, so you have to do a whole combat encounter. They're not logically placed. When you get in the air, they go really slowly, and most of the time they don't even get anywhere that's useful to you more than once. They usually take you to a mid-air treasure chest puzzle.
That's why I don't consider those traversal mechanics, because I don't think that's what they were. I think they were just puzzles that you had to find and then solve if you wanted to get a chest or a Oculus or something that was along their path. They didn't assist in the overworld movement at all. We didn't get anything like that until the second to last region they introduced, which had the jellyfish, but those only shot you straight up. So they helped you get vertical and higher in order to glide around, but we didn't have anything to assist with overall movement around Fontaine as a whole. So overall, Fontaine just felt really slow.
Yeah, also adding to that, like a lot of the puzzles they would have in these regions too would be like Super Mario Sunshine-esque floating water puzzles, which, I mean, Genshin has always had some of to a degree, but like those also weren't particularly well integrated.
Like my favorite puzzles in Fontaine were things like the ruins spelunking and the Narcissenkreuz Tower, both of which were basically identical to puzzles that I already did and enjoyed in Inazuma, that had like water level changes and stuff like that.
Unfortunately, it feels like, and this was touched upon earlier, like there wasn't tons of like reinterpretation of what water was as an element in a lot of where it expanded. So a lot of the expansions were just more of the same.
Yeah, I really kind of thought the Nemusia system was a cop-out when I would have rather seen water used in interesting ways, like, you know, water to fill up a weight, turning a paddle, diverting the flow, like pipe dream gameplay, and then like creating steam.
Yeah, using pyro characters to help create steam to help lift a balloon or something, because we've already seen the airships that could have been maybe more hot air balloons. I think it would have been interesting to see like electroshock reactions being used to power devices that maybe there wasn't a full current going towards.
Yeah, and you know what? This is going to become a statement that becomes like more and more contextless as we move into the future. But like as this game was launching as a live service game, there's a lot of emphasis really placed on elements in terms of how Hoyo is releasing them, because there were no new electric characters during the entire first year of the game. And then electro characters were introduced with energy mechanics, but then they continued to be relevant into Sumeru through the Hyper Bloom. So knowing that Natlan is right after this, my thought was, it was like, oh yeah, they're going to dovetail water into pyro by having a lot of steam interactions. And we absolutely did not see that in favor of this like kind of nothing Numa and Wisa system.
Yeah, how many times did you guys go into like a combat mechanic where you're like, well, I better make sure I have a Numa user on my team?
Literally never.
Literally never.
Not once.
I just bum rushed it.
Yeah.
I legitimately forgot that was a thing until you mentioned it, like a minute ago or something. I was like, oh, right, that was a thing I ignored for the most part. And then sometimes they pulled out like a couple of the Fontaine characters I picked up.
Ignorable.
It really felt like the Archon Quest forgot about it, because they didn't even address it until like the last conversation with Nouvelette about it, where it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, that's all fine now too. No need to worry about that. It's like I didn't even know that was a
problem. I forgot that was a problem. Like, the Numa and the Wisa, what? No, what about the melting peak? Whatever. Yeah, fine.
What does that have to do with Egeria, the font like situation? Nothing. It's like, why did you do like polarity puzzles? You could have done that in Inazuma. Why is it here?
You could have literally done it everywhere. This has nothing to do with water. And you know what? This has nothing to do with justice.
I actually don't remember all that much about Fontaine's Overworld, to be honest, because what I do remember is there was a lot of water. I climbed a tower and took a screenshot from the top of it because I could see the Jade Chamber in the distance, and I was like, hey, look, it's our house.
Yeah.
And there was like all the spheres of like water in the fucking sky that I spent some time faffing around in, following a quest chain or what have you, and I gotta say, it's a really weird experience to have like to effectively be flying, but also to have like vertigo at the same time. Like, goddamn.
Oof.
Yeah. I would like the floating cubes more if they didn't come at the expense of the Fontaine Engineering Institute, which was like, I think it sucked so much that wasn't in the game. It's literally the first and basically only thing we hear about Fontaine in the other regions leading up to it, how it's like this, inventor steampunk academy of like tinkerers and weirdos, and then we get there and it's been blown up and it's a ruin.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe they didn't want to double dip into that kind of vibe after the Sumeru Academia, but I love the Academia, so you should have.
As far as the silhouette of the map goes, the Aquabus lines were really cool, and there was a lot of emphasis placed on them in the story, but there were really only the two of them that led you either back to the harbor near the desert or over to the Opera Epiclese. And I feel like that was a huge disappointment. Like, there was no... It probably would have been too resource intensive to like repair the broken Aquabus line, but I was really hoping at the beginning of the patch that you kind of could. It would have also actually been nice to have one maybe circling the city. Like, they love Disneyland a lot. Why not have one train that just goes around the perimeter? But
yeah, the Melusine commentary on the trains is so charming, and I could have done with at least one or two more of those. Fontaine was just super barren, and I know some people are going to jump in and be like, oh, it's because of the lore. They've survived multiple drownings, multiple apocalypses. It makes sense that the landscape is desolate and that really the only like hotbeds of people would congregate in basically just the city and then like another like small outpost at Poisson. Okay, that's cute and good. Let me tell you, they're making a video game, and no amount of lore will excuse you from not making a place that is interesting to be in for a whole year. I'm sorry.
Like, there was a handful of houses that were like spread around, but there was never any interaction going on there unless it was like event specific. There were no permanent content updates that like made those areas worth visiting. We didn't like find larger collections of homes that like emphasize some kind of community that existed there. We didn't really even get that until the like second to last region update, where like we saw the local legends and a lot of the enemies who were kind of gathered in communities out there.
Yeah, that was a fun and interesting thing that was kind of underused and kind of thrown in there. I love the idea of the local legends.
Yeah, like that was a super cool way to add some more difficult fights in that weren't like world bosses and were just kind of done for like achievements and could largely be ignored if that wasn't really your bag. I think the problem was, though, you're right, we didn't have any other like hub zones outside of Poisson and Fontaine City. And when I guess Meripede, but
Oh my god, could you imagine how cool it would be if the Fonch landscape was dotted with like small villages that had taverns, and you would go to the taverns and you would talk to people there and they'd be like, oh, have you seen the giant robot at the top of the mountains? They say it is 200 years old and has never lost in a fight. And then you get like a local legend like marked out on your map.
That would have been great.
Oh, that would have been really good.
Like different bounties.
Yeah.
And that would have at least explained like, okay, maybe there's not large civilizations or societies outside of the main city, but there's like little pockets that still keep up with information, and that's the way you explore.
The taverns are also like ancient safe houses of the Marechaussee hunters. And you'll see like runes, like bloodborne runes carved on them that mean different things and stuff. It's just like they had all these like prompts that they kind of just didn't run with, and we'll get into this a lot. Just what's French about this? It needed to be Frencher. A wealth of stuff you could have used for this.
Yeah, the spoiler for later on is that their theming was just all over the place, and they had too many ideas and they couldn't cram them all in.
And they didn't even like delve into even the wealth of ideas they chose. It was also surface level.
There was not a single Parisian traffic jam in sight. Like,
where were the roundabouts? I scream at the heavens. Where were they?
You're going to have a whole region based on France and water, and you're not going to have like Monet's garden pool with the water lilies. I'll fucking kill you. In Minecraft.
There you go. There you go. All right.
I will say, though, world bosses were awesome. I think these are the best world bosses they've ever had. Coppelius and Coppelia are like my favorite bosses now. They're so dope. Like,
oh yeah.
That was like, that's the good encapsulation of what they were trying to go for with this theme of like the romantic clockwork ballerina based on this like opera, and they have tandem attacks. Like, I love like a ballet or opera like boss, and to have it be like two guys
but also from a design and gameplay perspective, like they were able to fit 2 boss fights into a single location. And that showed such great efficiency of space for like Fontaine and how limited that area was at the time.
And even the lore for them was unique because it's like, no, they're not a random monster out somewhere that you need to beat for mats. They're an invention on display in this exhibition area near the Opera Epicles. And the inventor is there asking you to give him combat data by fighting them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating part about Fontaine a little bit. It's that anytime they decide to go higher concept, it usually works really well.
Yeah.
Like the Centaur model that was introduced with Petrichor late into the patch cycle, where it's like, okay, it's a golem, but it's also a centaur that plays the violin with its sword and shield and uses firepower. Like, this is amazing. Like, I do not have enough good things to say about that as an idea.
Yeah. And it wasn't even just like the, Capellian Capellius and the centaur fight. Like, I genuinely really love the boss fights against like the crab, the fire crab, the lightning seahorse.
The seahorse.
The Hydro Eidolon was fine. I could give her.
There's going to be some weak links, but remember, half the bosses in this game used to just be cubes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Hypostasis. You guys really won't be missed.
Nope. Not a bit.
Went out for the QB boys.
Also, because we've never actually said it, we called the Centaur being used as a boss model a full year before it was, because it appeared in the Herda space station at the beginning of Honkai Star Rail.
Yeah, we're still doing a victory lap about that multiple months later.
Well, I mean, yeah, it just goes to like further cement the point that was made before. Like, Hoyo is very efficient with what they produce and how they reuse things.
It's just the fact that Wolfie is like a reused pom-pom, if you look closely enough.
Yeah, when you pointed that out, I couldn't unsee it.
So, you're welcome, and thanks for listening to the Shade Chamber, who continue to be Apollo's favorite little guinea pigs of prophecy.
Please look forward to the final boss fight of the game looking like the Metal Gear Solid 3 ending.
Ooh, it's gotta be, right? Those stupid little flowers.
Yeah, the flowers in Lumine's hair. What she points out when you play as her.
The flowers in my hair!
The flowers in my hair?
How do you guys feel about HP mechanics?
Way more interesting than I expected.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually kind of always had high expectations for this. I think that HP loss and gain as a mechanic, as shown in Warframe, is always indicative of like a good development of like kind of getting into new levels of gameplay.
Love me a red mage, yum yum yum. Love me the path of destruction, yum yum yum.
It's interesting to see how the connotations of water changed throughout the game. Early on, water was definitely more explicitly like healing linked. You had characters like Barbara and Barbara and Barbara. And in fact, at the beginning of the game, Hydro Elemental Resonance on your team conferred a healing rate bonus. As the game evolved, the devs realized that that actually wasn't that helpful or useful to players of the game, so they changed it to an HP bonus, which synthesized more with characters whose HP is linked to usually their damage or buff output. Fontaine starts with that by giving us characters such as Neuvillette, whose attack is scaled off of his HP, but then it like goes further into the Bond of Life characters, which use HP loss and gain as a mechanic, eschewing even the ability to heal from external influences.
And as we've learned really early on, the power of water is to take any shape. So yeah, this is the evolution. Using mechanics, HP mechanics specifically, as a risk-reward system, which I think was a brilliant move on their part.
Yeah, it really makes the
really
combat feel a lot more engaging, and like you have to pay more attention to it just because there is that risk now. Like Risley was probably one of my favorite characters introduced in Fontaine gameplay-wise because it did feel a lot more engaging. You have to be up close and personal with an enemy. You have to be like keeping track of his charge attacks to make sure he's healing before his health drops below 50%. Like it felt a lot more visceral and like combat-y than some of the other encounters that I've done where it's just, switch to Ganyu and shoot from a distance till dead.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense that essentially by engaging with these HP mechanics, they're willing to make characters a little bit more power creepy, but in a way that's balanced by the fact that you really have to watch out for how much HP you're losing, which I think is a pretty good balance.
In Sumeru, you started to see more characters who dictated what other kinds of characters you had to have on the team, like someone applying hydro, or someone shielding or healing. Bond of Life characters like Arlecchino are defined by who you don't want on your team. You have no practical use for a healer because your main DPS does not benefit from it, and in fact is a detriment to her damage boost at all. So it really changes the way you kind of think about like who to bring on your little quartet and what makes sense for the kind of character that you're driving the team with in a way that you've really never seen before before Fontaine.
Does anyone have Clorand and kind of like can talk a little bit about her mechanics? I don't quite understand how her healing works.
Oh, it's actually fairly simple in true Dante fashion. So you essentially just build Bond of Life by shooting with your skill, and then you reduce that Bond of Life by using her Stinger with her skill again. And the more Bond of Life you have, the additional effects essentially get stacked on top of that.
So very much the Ebony and Ivory, like shoot into Stinger into combo into shoot for CC.
Basically, except it's not even CC, it's just straight up damage. So like there's kind of 3 modes to it depending on how much Bond of Life you have. If your Bond of Life is at 0%, it does nothing. If it's anything above, I think 50%, it deals like some additional damage and heals a little bit. And then if it's at 100%, it increases that by a lot.
In a game and, in fact, a genre that has plenty of Virgil derivatives, Clorand stands apart as being our first Dante. It's not apparent at first because, of course, she acts like Virgil and she dresses like Lady Maria, who is also a Virgil, arguably.
It's definitely funny that her most defining feature that she's introduced as is being like a duelist swordswoman, and in her gameplay, it's like actually all gun.
It's
just pretty
funny.
Its defining feature is that button.
That too.
No, that's
projectile of all.
That just holds her feature together.
And that's going to do it for us this time on the Shade Chamber. Join us next time as we continue our Au revoir Fontainois Ménage à Trois with a look at some of the permanent system changes that came to Genshin over the course of versions 4.x, including the endgame mode we didn't know we wanted, Imaginarium. As usual, you can find the Shade Chamber at Genshin Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are sold. If you've enjoyed the discussion so far, please leave a comment on YouTube or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It means a lot to us. You can find us on Twitter at ShadeChamberPod, contact us at shadechamberpodcast@gmail.com, and of course, check out our new community Discord, Shades of Tevat, which we share with fellow Genshin podcast, Tales of Tevat. The Discord link can be found on our YouTube channel and in this podcast description. Until next time, Illuminati, keep it classy, and we'll see you again soon in the Shade Chamber.